Welcome to the Breakthrough Success Podcast, helping you achieve that breakthrough you've always been looking for in your business. And now your host, Mark Guberti.
Hello and welcome. I'm your host, Mark Guberti, and this is the podcast for marketers and small business owners who are looking for the breakthrough for their businesses. I am very excited about this show. For episode 66 of the Breakthrough Success Podcast, we are going to talk about building one of the world's top product management conferences from scratch with our guest, Mike Belsito. Mike is the co-founder of Product Collective, which is a community for product people. In addition to co-founding and developing this community, he also co-founded and organized Industry, the product conference, where product managers with world-class products gather together to share their insights and to learn so they can build, launch, and scale their creations. And now it is my pleasure to welcome Mike to the show.
Mark, thank you so much for having me. I'm pumped to be here.
Mike, it's a pleasure to have you on the Breakthrough Success Podcast, and organizing big events like these. I mean, it's really fascinating to think about what goes into them. And before we take a deep dive into those things, just give us some backstory and let us know why you decided to co-found and organize Industry.
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you what, 15 years ago, I would never have thought that I would be, considered by some people an event planner. I guess that's what I am, although that's definitely not how I identify myself. But really, for me, the past 13 years, it's all been spent in early stage technology companies. So right out of business school, I went to business school at Case Western Reserve University. And right out of business school, I started as employee number one at a early stage tech company that ended up growing. By the time I left it 6 years later, it ended up growing to be about a $30 million company. There were about 120 employees. And it was cool for me to have a front row seat at what it was like to build that business and be a part of that growth. I left there to start a company called eFuneral, which was a internet company in the death care space. And we had that company for 3 years. We went the whole route of raising capital from angel investors and a venture capital company. We raised about $1 million total. But I always call it kind of like we had a fail sale. Like ultimately, it was not the success we wanted it to be. But we built up some value, and we were acquired. And again, it wasn't the type of acquisition where I could just retire on a beach for years or as long as I'd like. But we were able to return something back to investors. But what it meant was I had to go find another job. And, when you're running a company and even just being in the world of startups where, that first job that I had, that company was called Find a Way. My title was Find a Wayer. I wasn't defined as, marketing specialist or sales specialist. So you wear a lot of hats in a startup, whether you're employee number one or whether it's your own startup. So when I left eFuneral, I was trying to figure out, well, what's next for me? What am I? Am I a biz dev guy? Am I a marketing guy? And there was a company, a ticketing technology company that recruited me to be their director of product strategy. And I remember very clearly Googling, what does a director of product strategy do? Because I really had no idea. And even when I met with them, I said, I think this sounds really cool, but the thing is, I don't know if I'd be a fit. I'm not I didn't go to school for product management. And they were like, oh, Mike, nobody did. Nobody went to school for product management. It's not really a thing. And so it opened my eyes up to the fact that this product management thing, this is something that you don't really learn in school. You learn by doing other things, whether you're a computer science person, you're a software developer, whether you're in business development, but you're spending a lot of time with customers and you've learned how to ask them questions. And so for me at that point in time, I was just trying to figure out what it meant to be a product person. I took that role, but I felt like I was faking it. So I just immersed myself in books and, reading blogs and podcasts and all sorts of things and just trying to learn product management on the go. But the way that I learn best is through other people face to face, just asking them about their experiences. And so in Cleveland, Ohio, which is where I'm from, there's definitely product people, throughout the community, but there's not this center of gravity pulling everybody together. So the industry started really by me as this new product person, really just trying to meet other product people and selfishly wanting them to bring all of the best product people to where I was. And part two of that is right at that time, a friend of mine, he had started a conference that was just more like a regional tech conference, and I was a speaker at it. And he'd asked me for feedback, and as a speaker, and I'm like, I thought it went great. People seem to like it, but there's a lot of regional technology conferences, and maybe you should think about trying to specialize. And I said, hey, I'll tell you what, I'm trying to figure out what it means to be a product person. Maybe you could specialize this, and just focus on the niche of product people. And, I'm like, I don't think there's not anything else like that in the Midwest, but even in the whole world, maybe there's only a handful of product conferences that are really legitimate. And he said, well, what if we did that together? And so that whole experience of really being a new product person and combining that with speaking at my friend's conference and having that conversation with him, it led us to both deciding, hey, let's launch Industry as a conference for product people. And, that first year, we met at end of 2014, had that lunch, but 2015 was the first year of Industry. We envisioned people might come from just a couple hours away. We had people from 21 states and 7 countries come to Cleveland for that first year. So it seemed like right away we really struck a chord. And now we've had 3 conferences. We're planning our first European conference. And maybe more importantly than the conferences, we built this whole community called Product Collective, where product people from all over the world can connect every single day, not just the 2 days a year where we're having Industry take place. But yeah, that's sort of the origin story of Industry.
Thank you for sharing with us how Industry started. And I know with organizing an event like this, there's a lot of logistics that are involved. And I wonder if you could share with us some of those logistics for people who are thinking about organizing their own event.
Sure. There's definitely so much that goes into organizing. And by the way, it's not a one-person job. In fact, even for us, it's more like when you count all of the people that are involved with Industry, probably 20, 30 person job, maybe closer to 30, yet there's only 3 of us that work on it year round. And so, you ramp up working with production partners and volunteers and such. But, when you think about all of the logistical things that are involved with planning a conference, I like to think of it as first thinking about what are the experiences that you're creating. And then you think of all the logistics involved with those experiences. So for us, there's 3 distinct experiences we care about: the speaker experience, the sponsor experience, and then probably most importantly, the attendee experience. So with those 3 things, it stems all sorts of other things you have to do. From the speaker experience, first, you have to go out and find the speakers, right? And so depending on the type of event that you're organizing, that might mean going into your local community and, finding somebody that has a unique point of view on a topic, that you'd like to include in your event. At a much larger level, like for us, this past year we had people from 37 states and 13 countries come to Industry. We have to try to attract speakers that are some of the top product people in the world. This past October we had, or rather it was September, but we had Jason Fried of Basecamp. We had Ty Ahmad Taylor. He used to run THX, but now he's the head of product marketing at Facebook. In the past, we've had the head product partner of Google Ventures. So it takes work to reach out to these folks, not just to find them and send an email, but you have to think about how can you position yourself differently, because guess what? Probably 500 people have emailed Jason Fried asking them to speak at his event or at their event this past year. So just even trying to get a plan together to reach out to speakers and finding a creative way to connect, that's a whole process. But then once you're able to attract those speakers, being able to make sure that they feel like the VIPs that they are throughout the entire year, that's an important logistical aspect you have to keep in mind. So what that means is things like creating a speaker guide. It's not necessary, but gosh, they're going to care a lot more about your conference and they're going to have a better experience if everything's well organized. Having a single point of contact for those speakers. When it's actually at the conference, having a place for them to prepare for their talk, like a green room, being able to provide them with detailed agenda outside of what's shared with the public, literally making them a part of the team and feeling like a part of the team. That's all important. So that's one aspect. Then there's the sponsor experience. And, not all events go out and recruit sponsors. For us, that's a major part of our business. Our business is ticket revenue and sponsor revenue. So for the sponsors, though, what I've found, and this will vary and from event to event, but for our conference, we target technology product managers. And it's very clear to us the types of companies that want to market to those are companies that sell to technology product managers. And what they're really looking for is marketing qualified leads. So I say that it'll vary, from conference to conference, because there might be some conferences where the branding is really important and, people want to see their brand plastered all over your conference. For industry, that wasn't the case. These are companies that want marketing qualified leads. So for us, we have to design the sponsor experience to help them do that in a way that doesn't take away from the attendee experience. So really, I guess when you think of logistics, first, it starts with trying to understand what do your sponsors even want in the first place, and then creating products, if you want to think of it that way, that you can sell to them that help get them what they need. So if our sponsors want marketing qualified leads, well, that means that we have to design an area within our venue to help them market to attendees, and not just a little table where there's enough room for business cards, but we have to give them enough space where they can properly demo their products, where they can, properly market themselves in the way that they would do anywhere else. So that's a part of it. But not just that, you have to then keep in mind, all right, how are we going to help our sponsors get all their stuff in, get all their stuff out? In some venues, that might mean, maybe they're partnered up with a local union. So it means working with that local union to understand what the expectations are, sharing all that information with the sponsors. For smaller events, that might not be necessary, but even still, you still have to plan for, all right, when are the times we want our sponsors to connect with attendees? Where will we actually have them? How do we have them be a part of the venue that adds to the experience, it doesn't take away from it? So that's really important. But then there's the attendee experience. And for us, again, that's probably the top thing, because if you don't have a solid attendee experience, nothing else really matters. If you have a solid attendee experience, in my opinion, speakers, sponsors, those types of things follow. Because if you're creating this amazing event that's world class, and when I say world class, that doesn't mean it has to be the biggest in the world, but it's just if you want to create the best event, even in your own local neighborhood, you really want to give your attendees a great experience. So a lot of the logistics involved with that includes, you have setting up ticketing, and there's a lot of great ticketing, platforms out there that allow you to do that, from Eventbrite to Invite, and there's all sorts of platforms. But there's also, you have to think about, how are people going to find out about you? So you might set up your ticket on Eventbrite, but even still, you have attendees that they might get a lot of value out of your event, but they just don't know about it. And so a lot of the logistics for us, in fact, probably the overwhelming majority of those logistics, include basically marketing our event to find those attendees. And that could come in many different forms. It could come in partnering with organizations. It could involve paid marketing. For us, it's not really a route we've taken. But it has to be, probably the biggest effort is going out and finding those attendees and then communicating with them throughout the process. I think one big mistake that people make is they'll find an attendee, they'll sign up for their conference, and then it's just radio silence until the event. And people are confused about, well, where do I go to park? Who else is coming to this conference? Like, what's the agenda like when I get there? So I think, just think about it. What's the experience you want to plan for your attendee, not just at the conference, but from the minute they buy their ticket, or even the minute that they check out your website to the time that they actually walk out your door at your venue. What do you want that experience to be? And then design around it. So that's what comes to mind for me when I think of logistics.
Mike, thank you for sharing with us the variety of logistics that are involved with organizing an event like industry. And you mentioned that one of the important things is getting attendees in. And I was wondering if you could go into a little more detail about getting those attendees into a conference.
Yeah, and this is the big one. I mean, for us, we had to build our audience from scratch from the very beginning. We went the complete opposite route that some companies do, where it's like, we're a big media company. We have this major audience. Now let's figure out how to monetize. And okay, we'll create a conference. Well, for us, it was the total opposite. Instead of doing that, we said, look, this is something that product people need. We know that because we're product people. We need this. Let's build it. And then let's make sure that we could go out and find the audience. It's not build it and they will come. It's go out and find the audience. So for us, first you have to think about who is your audience? Like, what are the personas that you're creating for? For us, there's a couple of those personas. One is these were early stage technology product managers. And when I say early stage, I really mean not so early, not extreme startup, but more at the, say, Series A, Series B level, as they say in the venture capital world. So the companies themselves might have raised $10 to $30 million, or even if they haven't raised a dime, they probably have a few dozen to 100 employees. And on their product team, they probably have 10 or fewer product people, meaning product managers, VPs of product. That's a major persona for us. So those companies, a lot of times they're in growth mode, and they're trying to figure out, how do we continue to scale our organization and scale our product team? So they're looking for ways that they could learn. That is one major persona for us. And I guess I'll focus on that one in particular. So once you've identified personas just like that one, it's then trying to think about, all right, well, where do these people go to get information? Where do these people go when they want to learn? So in the case of our audience for industry, for product managers, they're going to a few different places. They're going, first of all, on Google, right? Like they might literally Google best product management conferences. And of course, we would love for our webpage to come up first when they do that. But let's be realistic. Like any new conference, you're not going to be on the very first result when somebody's typing something like that. So for us, we just had to think about, all right, well, we know our website's not going to necessarily be at the very top of Google, but what websites are at the top of Google when you type that? And it was things like Quora, which is a question and answer site. So, best product management conferences, the number one result was a Quora question for what are the best product management conferences that are out there. Well, guess what? On Quora, anybody can contribute, and, people upvote answers. So we contributed an answer, and we didn't just say like, come to industry. Industry is the best one. We said, yeah, full disclosure, we organize industry, but here's a list of, a few others that would be great for product people, basically naming our competition. And then, at that point, you could spread the word that, hey, I answered this question on Quora. Friends might upvote you. Within 24 hours, we got to our answer was the very first one, the very top one on Quora. So technically, we figured out a way within 24 hours to basically be at the top of Google. But there's other things that were on top of, right below that, like different websites that were promoting, the top product management conferences. Well, we reached out to those websites and we said, hey, great list. We're launching a new one, and look at our amazing lineup. By the way, when you're doing these things, you do have to have enough built out where you can at least position it to them to say, hey, look at what this is going to be. Basically, you have to have sort of an MVP created, right? It's not, the conference hasn't happened yet, but you have to market it like it is the world-class conference that you're building. So for us, it's going out and thinking of, okay, where are people going online? Where else are they turning to? Are they turning to podcasts? Are they following influencers on platforms like Twitter? If they are, that means that we have to go to those influencers. We have to go to those other platforms, and we have to be there whenever they're going to look for that information. So we made a list of influencers, that are important to product management professionals, and we reached out to them to say, hey, we're building this. We think it's special. In some cases, we're asking those folks to speak at our conference, but even if not, we're saying, hey, we'd just love it if you'd help spread the word. And a lot of those times they would. They'd tweet about it. They'd put it in their newsletters, and that really helped us that first year. So all of those things are really important, especially when you're building that audience from scratch. The last thing I want to mention, though, which shouldn't be underestimated, is literally reaching out to people individually cold. I will not forget the process we went through every single morning. By the way, this is when we had full-time jobs, but from 5 a.m. to 7 a.m., I'd be going through LinkedIn, looking at who are product people in the metro market areas that are, within, say, 3 hours drive from where we're at. And I would say, oh, okay, this is a product manager that works at Duolingo. Well, then I'll go onto Google and I'll look for the email extension for Duolingo. Not even necessarily for that person, but if I could just find it for one person at Duolingo, there's a pretty good chance I can guess at that person's email address, and I would just reach out to them. And some people might say, well, that doesn't scale. You can't do that all the time. Well, it might not scale, but you can do that. I mean, if you're able to fire off 50 emails a day like I was doing, and that was just with 2 hours of my time, you do that for 2 weeks straight. That's 10 days. You fired off 500 emails. And I will tell you, when they're personal emails, there's a better chance that people will reach back out to you, especially if you're personalizing them. So it might not scale, but I would argue, especially when you're building your audience from scratch, you have to do a lot of things. I know Paul Graham, Y Combinator, said this. You do the things that don't scale so you could figure out what works and then scale them up later on. So when it comes to starting from scratch, that's what we did. That's the process that we went through, and went from that first year where we had 250 attendees to this past year we had over 750, and we're already on pace. We're already selling tickets for Industry 2018. We'll have over 1,000 people. So it's not like this is the biggest conference in the world, but this is something that has it's starting to scale for us.
Mike, thank you for sharing those insights regarding how we get more attendees. And I definitely find you shared a lot of interesting things like the cold emailing. I find that works a lot, especially if you do personalize it. I feel like with the cold communication, people don't want to go that way, but it's a really great avenue. And I find it really interesting how you got your friends together to upvote you on Quora. That's sort of like how authors I've heard they'll get their friends to leave reviews, but I mean, upvoting on Quora, that'll put you on the top, and that can help a lot with ranking high in a place like Google. But another thing that I know helps really well is reviewing what you've done so you can learn from mistakes, see what you did right. So what does your review process look like once an industry event is over?
Yeah, well, what I will definitely say is I think it's important to continually review yourself throughout the year. So you definitely want to have a postmortem for your event, but just make sure that you're, constantly keeping things in check throughout the year. If you're doing something that isn't working, you want to change gears. Maybe you're sending all those emails off, but for your type of event, it's just not something that's resonating. And so I don't want to, don't continue doing something that isn't working necessarily, but after an event, I do think it's important to have a postmortem for a lot of reasons. One, again, as a product person, I think of my conference as a product, and I want to fine tune it. I want it to provide more value for our customers every single year. So we do things. I think there's a few things you could do. That one, keep a running list as you're going through your event, and when there's something, an improvement that you want to make, jot it down. So then after the conference, you'll have this laundry list of things, and ask your volunteers, ask your partners, whoever's involved with the event, ask them to do the same thing. So right away, you'll have a list of 50 things that you all know could make the event even better. But then afterwards, you want to engage your audience. And there's a couple different ways you could do it. I mean, one of the things that we do is literally before, folks fly home, they're getting an email from us with a survey about the conference. And we ask a variety of questions about each of the speakers and about different parts of the conference. We also ask an NPS related question, Net Promoter Score. And that's sort of our, the one metric that matters for us, because we can compare that every single year and we can see, okay, how did folks, did this resonate with folks this year versus last year? What about versus 2 years ago? We could tell if we're doing a better job or worse. So that's helpful. The other thing is, after you survey folks, I always like to ask, because sometimes people might say, yeah, that was a 10 out of 10. But then they actually do have pieces that they would share that actually could make the event better. So again, it's sort of those three things. It's like, what do you observe? And then what do your customers observe? And how do you quantitatively measure that? But then what are the qualitative measures that you can have with customers? So that really just means having one-on-one conversations with your customers, with people that have attended your event.
Mike, thank you for sharing those insights on what your review process looks like so you can learn from past mistakes, see improvements, and make the next industry event better year after year. And one of the questions that I love asking people is for a big challenge that they faced in their journey and a powerful lesson that they learned during that challenge. So I was wondering if you could share that big challenge with us and what you learned from it.
Yeah, I mean, I think for what we've gone through with industry, the big lesson that I've learned is just you could put on an amazing event like this. You could have the best speakers, and you could have this really awesome, amazingly designed website. That does not mean that people will come. It is not a build it and they will come scenario. You really, really, especially in the beginning, have to work very, very hard to make sure that people even know about you. I mean, this is 3 years in. We still have product people that reach out and say, how have I never heard of industry? And I'm like, that's a great question. I mean, I would have loved for you to have known about industry sooner. So I think the takeaway from that is just when you are putting an event together, and it doesn't matter if it's as large scale as what industry is, or even if it's a smaller community event, just make sure that you set a plan in place to attract your audience and be really diligent about it. And don't be discouraged if you go through your event like ours. The first year we weren't profitable, but we were pretty close, and it was enough. We had people coming from all these faraway places, traveling to Cleveland, Ohio, from as far away as China. So we knew that we were striking a chord, and we knew how we could, tweak the model so that we could make it profitable. And it was shortly thereafter. But I think, for us, it was the realization that, hey, we're putting together this amazing world-class conference, but we need to do the work. We need to put the work in to actually get people. And I think when you accept that and you're willing to put in the work, even if you're 3 months away, 2 months away from the conference, you still don't see those tickets come in. The only thing you could do is keep pressing on. So I think the biggest mistake, and we didn't make the mistake of just expecting that people will come, but I think it was harsh reality that we realized very quickly, and it forced us to be really diligent about that.
Mike, thank you for sharing with us that big challenge and the powerful lesson that you learned during that challenge. And as Breakthrough Success listeners know, because they've heard this question a lot, I'm a big bookworm. So I'm wondering if you could share with us 3 great books that you believe would have a great impact on Breakthrough Success listeners.
Sure. And these kind of are, they vary in terms of when I've read them. But the first that really comes to mind is Rework by Jason Fried. It's just, it gives you a glimpse into sort of like the philosophy behind Basecamp. And I'm a big believer in a lot of philosophies that Jason Fried puts out there. It's an awesome read. So that's one. Content Inc. is another one, and that's by Joe Pulizzi, who's actually been a big mentor to us. He actually is the organizer of Content Marketing World and founded that, and actually grew it to over 3,500 people. But Joe's whole business is based around content, but the whole message of the book is how really no matter what business you're in, content should be important to you. And there's ways to leverage that. So that's another one that I like. Then there's another book that, and it has more meaning to me personally, especially because of what I went through at eFuneral, but it's called The Monk and the Riddle. And I think basically it's a book about what it takes to be a startup entrepreneur. And I think no matter what stage you're at, no matter what type of startup you're going through, it will be relevant for you. It's a little bit of an older book, but the way that Randy Komisar, who was a senior partner at Kleiner Perkins, the way he wrote the book is he weaves in this fictional story of a fictional character named Lenny who runs funerals.com. So I was reading that book when I had my company eFuneral. So there are a lot of overlaps, and I actually got the opportunity to spend time with Randy Komisar after I had read the book, and got to ask him like, "Hey, was there a real Lenny?" and learned that there wasn't. But that meant that I kind of became the real Lenny. But anyway, so yeah, The Monk and the Riddle, Content Inc., and Rework would be my 3 choices.
Mike, thank you for sharing with us those 3 great books. And before I get to the portion where I let Breakthrough Success listeners know where they can find you on the web, I've asked you a bunch of questions throughout this interview, and I'm wondering, what is one question that you believe we need to be asking ourselves more often?
I think the biggest question people can always ask themselves is, do they really know what their customers want and need? I think that's something we should ask ourselves every day. I find myself asking that every day. Like, look, I'm a product person that's serving product people. If I'm not asking that question every day, I'm not doing my job. But I think a lot of people get caught up in the solutions that they're coming out with. A lot of people get caught up in, oh, look at this cool feature that we just rolled out. Is it really helping? Is it really, creating a big value and benefit for your customers? How often are you talking to your customers? That's really what comes to mind for me.
Mike, thank you for sharing with us that great question and all the insights you provided throughout this episode. And for Breakthrough Success listeners who want to learn a little more, where can we find you on the web?
Yeah, well, first of all, if you are interested in, and you identify with being a product person, whether you're an entrepreneur, whether you are a product manager at a technology company, you should definitely check out Product Collective. We have a membership where you sign up, it's free, and you get access to, we have a weekly newsletter. We do 2 live video Q&A chats every month with product leaders from throughout the world. We have a Slack community with 3,500 product people. So that's the way we keep people connected all year round. I definitely would encourage you to go to productcollective.com and sign up and do that. You could always, reach out to me directly at mike@productcollective.com, or, if you just visited our website, productcollective.com, or our conference website, which is just industryconference.com, you'll see a little chat person pop up. That's me. And I have some people, it has my face there, and some people are like, oh, that's not really you. It's just a bot. I'm like, no, if you see it on there, I might not be on there all the time, but when you see it pop up and if you see me typing back, that you're actually talking to me. So you're welcome to chat me up there as well. And then I'm on Twitter too. It's just at Belsito. It's Belsito.
All right, Breakthrough Success listeners, if you want those links in the show notes to this episode, you can head over to markgilberti.com/E66. Mike, it was a pleasure to have you on the Breakthrough Success podcast.
Hey, the pleasure was mine. Thank you so much for having me.
To never miss an episode, don't forget to subscribe to the podcast on whatever player you are using. If you are a regular listener and haven't done so already, I would greatly appreciate it if you could give this podcast a review or a rating. 2 ways you could do this are through markgilberti.com/iTunes or markgilberti.com/Stitcher. That ends this episode. Don't forget, dream big, achieve greatness, and unlock your potential today. Want your tweets get retweeted to my 360,000 Twitter followers? All you have to do is say something nice about the Breakthrough Success podcast and include the link markgilberti.com/iTunes. Once you've posted that tweet, email me, mark@markgilberti.com, and I will retweet your tweet to my 360,000 followers. This podcast is a production done by Mark Gilberti. For more insights, head on over to markgilberti.com.